Alright, let's get the show on the road. I want to talk a little bit more about knives. I did a live cast on knives a little while back, and I want to address it in a little bit more detail. And just to fix the problems my OCD introduces, I'm going to turn this knife around. Better. These are the budget knives that I mentioned during the live cast. I didn't want to go into too much excessive detail back then because I was still going through them, but I basically purchased a bunch, and the criteria was that they'll have to be under 50 bucks, and I spent some time carrying them, using them, cooking with them, doing all sorts of general purpose things that that you normally do with a knife. And the idea was to see which ones of these budget knives would work best for me. The specifications on these are somewhat similar. Here's a table that we can look at in a little bit more detail. The names of the knives are there. I'm going to go through each one and talk about it a little bit. But as you look at the table, one of the things that's important to note, other than blade lengths, and all of these are pretty much from 3 to 3.6 inches, except for this little guy. That's the Bastion MiniBro Cleaver, or whatever it's called. That's effectively a keychain knife. The idea I got this one because I wanted to see if a knife this small can be useful, and they have two blade shapes. One is moderately normal blade shape. This one is just fundamentally stupid. So I wanted to play with it and see if it works better in a small knife. I know it doesn't work great in a larger knife, at least for anything that I may want to do. All the other knives are between 3 and 3.5 inch blade lengths. And the ones you see right here, these are sort of everyday carry types, and I also added two more knives that are more of a gentleman's folder type thing. That's these two. This is a CJRB Ria knife with kind of a puck of wood handles stuff, and this one is the CRKTC. Now you begin to see one of my complaints with it. This one is the only knife here that is more than $50. It's I think 65 bucks. This particular variant, because I wanted the one with D2 steel, like most of these knives are. This particular variant is specific to Blade HQ, and they also ordered the customization service. So I engraved. I had them put DLO. I don't know if you guys could see it. DLO on it. You should be able to see it like this. DLO on it, just for the heck of it. And I wanted to use it. It's kind of an interesting design, and it's pretty. You know, it has certain advantages, but overall I'm not terribly happy with the design. Anyhow, so looking at the specs, it tells you what's tip up, tip down. Really important thing is blade thickness. A lot of what I got out of using these knives for a little bit has to do with blade thickness and to a certain significant degree blade width. I did not list blade width, but we'll see what all these blades look like as I go through them, and I'm pretty much going to go through them from left to right. Okay, starting with the Ontario Red one. I happen to have two of these. The one on the left I've had for quite a few years. I bought it when they just introduced it. And this is a US 8 stainless steel. It's a knife that generally lives in the glove compartment of my car. You know, it's kind of scratched up and everything. But it works perfectly adequately, and I'm fairly happy with it. However, I did pull it out and put it to some use, and the identical knife, except with the D2 blade steel for the with D2 blade steel works a lot better. From which standpoint, it's a little bit less rust resistant, but it is but it does hold its edge quite a bit longer, and that made a difference. The handles are about the same, just a different color. Okay. The nice thing about this blade, it's sort of a, with a full set, with the larger knives, this is my favorite of the bunch, and I'll explain why. It is a very, very flexible design. It is a liner lock. The clip is black, which I like. I don't like shiny clips because, you know, it's very visible outside the pocket. The clip can be reconfigured for tip up or tip down position for both right hand and left hand use, which makes a good amount of difference to me. The way the blade locks, when I first looked at it, I thought the liner lock looked flimsy, but you know, like the other one I have, I used for quite a long time with no issues, and the lockup is pretty solid. So I'm generally pretty happy with this knife. The way the blade and the handle are shaped is a little bit interesting. For cooking, it was less optimal than for some other uses, partly because if you notice the line of the edge is kind of raised a little bit compared to the front of the handle. But for camping and different whittling and all sorts of other uses, it is a very, very effective blade shape. And notice that given the roughly 3.5-inch blade length, you notice how long the edge is and how pronounced the belly is. This belly area here is what you'll be using most of the time when you are using the knife. Okay. So I'm going to leave them open so that as I go through them, we can see them better. Notice, so this one is sufficiently old. It still has Randall Adventure Training logo on it. It's before Ontario, the cutlery that sells it, relabeled themselves. Okay. Next in line is another knife from the same series, more like a miniature version of the other one. Everything else is almost the same. And this is the Model 2, also a D2 blade. Interestingly, oh, that still has the original logo. Not sure why, but it does. Slightly different color. These come with polished or coated blades and different color handles. The handles are plastic of some sort. I've seen it listed as FRN6. I've seen it listed as FRN. I've seen it listed as nylon 6. I suspect it's the same thing. I didn't do any research. It doesn't feel as nice as G10 to my hand, but it is nice enough, and once again it's proven durable, hasn't given me any issues. On the smaller knife, everything is essentially the same. It's just a scaled down copy. What is really critical in this case is that when they were scaling it down, they made, can you see this? Yeah, you can see it. When they were scaling it down, they made sure that the blade is thinner. How a knife cuts really is really affected by the thickness of the blade and how it's ground. In this case, it's flat ground, both knives are, all the way back to the spine. So there's this slow tapering flat. The knife is easy to clean, the knife is easy to sharpen, and the way this edge works, it's an easy to use knife, right? It just cuts through, and even on a fairly deep penetration, it works fine. Okay. The same guys who designed the Model 1 and Model 2 red knives for Ontario are behind a company called ESEE. I'm assuming it means ESE, something like that. And that's what the next two knives are for. This is the Avispa. This is the full-size version. Different blade shape, right? This one is a spear point blade shape and different handle. While the other one has plastic scales on both sides, this one has a plastic scale here, and it's stainless steel on the other side, with something called a frame lock, with a fairly massive locking bar. This has some advantages, some disadvantages. One advantage of this is that if you're right-handed and you carry it in your pocket, the smoother metal scale is what is rubbing on the pocket, so you don't wear out your jeans quite as much as you would otherwise. Okay, the clip once again can go tip up or tip down on both sides. My preferred mode carry for knives is tip up on the right hand side. I am right-handed. Unfortunately, that is the one configuration where this knife did not work well for me. One of the reasons where with the knives of this size I do prefer the Ontario version. Why? I think it's just a minor oversight, but what happens is that if you position the clip here, the bottom of the clip sits on a locking bar. If you notice here, it sits on a scale overall and touches the locking bar. If you go tip up, put the clip here, it's entirely on the locking bar. And the way I grasp the knife to open it, I kind of hook my fingers on the blade clip and squeeze a little bit. So what was happening when I was trying to carry it in a tip up configuration is that when I was squeezing it, I was really locking the blade and I just couldn't open it. It was so hard to open. It's generally not the smoothest knife, but it works well. In a tip up configuration, it was very hard for me to open it with the right hand. Tip down, it works fine. And when the locking clip is on this side in a left hand configuration, it works fine as well. Aside from that, it's a nice blade. Once again, there is a taper going all the way to the spine of the blade. The blade thickness is the same on Model 1 and Model 2. And if you were paying attention in the table that I was showing you earlier, it is a slightly thinner blade than the other full-size knife I have here, and that also makes a difference to how the knife cuts. Okay, the smaller version of the same knife from SE, also smaller frame lock. This one's called Zancudo, and this one I liked very much. Also a spear point, a little bit less of a belly, but still very usable. And if you're planning to stab someone, it's a wonderful shape. Not that I would ever do that. This one works totally fine in the tip up configuration because you notice the clip, it sits on the stainless steel scale. It doesn't just sit on a locking bar. See, the locking bar is now recessed here. Okay. I've carried this knife quite a bit. I like it. It is for such a small knife, it is strangely comfortable in my hand. And because it is a frame lock, it is comparatively thin, which I like. If you notice, if you look at it side by side with the Ontario Model 2, because it has plastic on one side only, right? It's overall slightly thinner and takes up slightly less space in your pocket. Moving right along, I'm gonna talk about the three knives from CJRB Cutlery. CJRB is, I believe, a budget brand for artisan cutlery out of China. So all of these, the knives we looked at so far, they were the ones manufactured in Taiwan. Now the rest of these are from China. This one is called CJRB Centros. Okay. It's a fairly beefy, roughly the same size as the larger SE or Ontario knives. It's clearly more stylish. The handle is surprisingly comfortable. I didn't think I'd find it comfortable, but it's not bad. For when you really need to put pressure on doing something with a knife, the larger handles, like this one in Avispa or in the Model 1, worked a little better for me, but I can't complain. The way this knife is styled is pretty aggressive, so to me it's an attractive looking knife. But one of the things I did, the blade on this one is too thick. And the grind, while it looks like a flat, maybe very mild. Hold on, no, I think it's a flat ground. It goes all the way, almost all the way up to the top, but not so much. So what happens is that the blade behind the edge on this knife is a fair bit thicker than on the previous ones that I've talked about. When you just need to slice something, it works fine. But if you need to make a deeper cut, this functions as a wedge. It's more likely to get stuck on something and more likely to break something if I'm cutting apples, right? This knife cuts, this knife breaks, right? Does it matter? To me it does, because like I said, I use these for everything. The tip looks fairly fragile, to give you an idea, right? So the way they did the tip on the SE, it is a little bit better backed up tip. The tip here is a little bit more fragile, and next to Ontario, the same thing. There is more metal going all the way to the tip. So I suspect this one would be more likely to break. Okay, I haven't broken it, and I did some use with it. Overall, it's a nice knife. The handles here are G10, in a sort of a textured G10. It feels a little bit better and a little bit less slippery than the handles on other knives, but you know, the other ones here haven't given me any real problem. Where this knife does really well is with the opening action. So these CJRB knives have some sort of a ball bearing in here. All of the ones I have 3 CJRB knives here, they all do it, and that makes the opening very smooth. It's very, very smooth. It's smoother than the Taiwanese knives made here that have, I think, just the regular bushings. Okay. All right, moving right along. The next knife on the menu, so to speak, is the CJRB Small feldspar. Apparently, there's a large one the size of the Centros. Another G10 handle, D2 blade. This is a smaller knife. It's 3-inch length. The blade is a little bit thinner than on the Centros, but it is thicker than on the small Taiwanese made knives here. And these thinner knives do cut better. Thinner knives generally cut better. In principle, the trade-off is durability. However, for folding knives like this, where they usually fail, if they do fail, is either the tip breaks, and here the tip is reasonably reinforced, definitely more durable tip than on the Centros, but more often than not it's somewhere in the folding mechanism. So I'm not convinced it is all that great of an idea to put really thick blades on folders, but at least not for the way I use them. This one also has a bushing here, so the opening action is very smooth. It's generally a comfortable knife. The clip is tip up, can be on either side, right or left-handed. What I don't like on both of these CJRB knives is that the clip is very shiny. It sits outside my pocket, reflects light, and potentially attracts attention. Stone-washed blade. Overall, this is actually a nice knife. But for general purpose use, although it has better materials in terms of handle materials and stuff, I do prefer the Zancudo. I think this is a little bit better. In the way the handle is shaped, this interesting swell here fits my hand just a little bit better. For a lot of real-world use with a knife, having a little bit more width to the handle gives you much better directional control. These narrow handles still work well, and they're pretty, but they don't quite give you the same amount of control. The third CJRB knife I've got here is their take on a gentleman's folder with the Paco wood handles, and even a slightly thinner blade shape, matte, thankfully not shiny, titanium clip. You can have it in any configuration you want, as long as it's tip up right-handed. Also some sort of a ball bearing opening mechanism, so it's nice and smooth, and it works quite well despite having a fairly compact handle. They did something fairly clever with the blade shape. Notice it's a little bit wider here than here, and this nice gradual curve gives it a longer cutting edge than most small knives with the same blade shape. I really like using this one. This is easily my favorite of the CJRB knives. The steel on this one is different. It's not D2 steel like most of these knives. It's a steel called AR RPM 9, which is their quote-unquote proprietary stainless powdered steel. They released a chemical composition. It looks like fairly normal, nothing super exotic steel, but because it's powdered, it's probably pretty consistent, and it holds the edge about the same, almost as well as the D2 knives here, so it's good enough for me for general purpose use. I really like this one. It's available with higher end handle materials and stuff like that, but as is, I actually like it quite a lot. Moving on, this is from a company called Steel Wheel, also a Chinese knife. This one does not have a thumb stud of any sort. It's flipper only. I'm not particularly good with the flipper, and I'm really not good with the flipper with the left hand. So the clip here is set up so that I can carry it on the left side and practice with the left hand, but I don't like it. This is not my preferred mode of opening knives. On this one, the liner locking bar is a little bit flimsy the way it is. The lockup is not quite as good, but it works. Hasn't closed on my hands yet. The handle is some sort of a FRN plastic. It's very lightweight. Feels flimsy. It's slightly more flexible than G10, but once again, I haven't had any issues yet. Other than the flip mechanism, one of the things I don't like about this knife is that it's a pretty thick blade, just to give you an idea. Okay. And that has an effect on how well it cuts. It's pretty thick. It's not ground all the way to the edge. It's not very wide. It bites okay, edge holding is perfectly fine, but if you're really trying to cut something with it, it's not ideal. Okay. Next on my list after the Steel Wheel is the QSP Parrot, and that's this guy here, and that's easily the cheapest knife in this group. I bought two of them, a green handle, I'll eventually give it to my son, and pink handle that I'm going to give to my daughter. Yeah, I know it's cliche, but he likes green and she likes pink. It's 25 bucks. It's D2 steel. It's not super polished, it's not super perfect. The lockup is decent. G10 handle feels pretty good in the hand. It's simple. You can put the clip on either side, tip up, carry. Spear point blade, not too dissimilar in terms of blade shape from the Zancudo that I like, slightly longer. It is thicker, which I don't like. It's something they keep on doing. There's no need for a folding knife in this size range to be that thick. But you know what? For 25 bucks, I'm not going to complain. It holds its edge. It was fairly evenly ground. I call me impressed. I mean, for 25 bucks, it's a big deal. Like the knife that's my normal daily carry is usually one of these two, the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and the Spyderco Spidey Chef, 120 bucks to 130 bucks, right? I can buy, what's it? And this one is 25 bucks, right? So I can buy 9 of these for the cost of one of my daily carry knives, and that's shove one in every glove compartment, right? It's sort of a big deal. Next is a CRKTC. It's only a knife in this lineup that is more than 50 bucks. It was $64. This is green micarta scales and a DLC coated D2 blade. I think it's a special for Blade HQ. I bought it because I just thought it was pretty, and also I put DLO on it as a customization. It's their take on a gentleman's folder, and it has more style than substance to me. It's pretty with the bronze or DLC or whatever materials and all that sort of stuff. The clip is tip down only. The knife profile is narrow and thick, so doesn't give you as good of a control. The blade is suitably thin and pretty at 0.08 inch. But because it is so narrow, cutting is not super efficient. But if you're going to stab in someone, this works really well, actually. I'm going to keep it because I like the way it looks. But many modern recent CRKT knives I've seen had issues with the lockup, and this one is no exception. Notice that the liner lock engagement to the back of the blade is pretty small. So this is not something I would generally consider safe. I'm going to putz around with it a little bit more. I mean, it hasn't closed back on my fingers yet, so far so good. But I'm going to putz around with it a bit more and see if it wears in, and if not, I might send it to CRKT and make them fix it. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. Last and least is the knife that's here almost by accident. It's basically a keychain knife. You put your keychain here. It's a 2-inch blade. It's from a company called Bastion, I think. It's called Braza MiniBro Cleaver. They do make this knife in some sort of a more reasonable blade shape. I wanted to try this one just to see if this kind of a straight edge is any more useful than in larger knives, and no, it's just, I don't know. This blade shape makes no sense to me. I mean, it's better than not having a knife, but I don't know, it's weird. Generally, with a normal blade shape, the way the handle is shaped, with a 2-finger hold, you can actually use it. Not for too many things, but you can use it. And when you need a knife, you need a knife for opening boxes and all the usual stuff. It's fine. But once again, the blade is too thick, given how short this knife is. Okay. So after all this exercise, carrying and using these knives for a while, I've spent a good amount of time with all of them, enough to resharpen each one once, twice. In terms of edge holding, they're all pretty close. I think it's just normal variations to a D2 heat treat. It's an old steel that's been around for a long time, so people know how to heat treat it, and you'll have your usual production variations. If I had to have just one, largish knife and just one smallish knife, I would, for the large knife, I definitely prefer the Ontario Rat Model 1. It's a very flexible design. It's fairly beefy. It's fairly durable. It holds the edge well. There's nothing fancy about it, but everything about this knife just works. Given that D2 is it's stain resistant, it's not really stainless. Well, few things are really stainless. I'd probably get a coated blade so that it'll get scratched up and not look pretty, but it's going to be fine. With smaller knives, for general utility, I think it is the Zancudo. The downside is that you can't really set up for left-handed carry, which I'd like Model 2 is I set up for left-handed carry. That's the downside. The plus side is that for a small knife, this handle is really hand-feeling and comfortable, and the blade is efficient. Just it does everything I need it to. Everything works properly on this blade. Just can't complain. I will say that the gentleman's folder from CJRB called Ria, R-I-A, it made me think about it. Because the handle is narrow, the shape is not as efficient for general use as the Zancudo, but it works nicely, and I carried it, and I might actually continue to carry it for a bit to see how well it agrees with me. I like this knife. This was the biggest surprise for me of them all. And if you are on a budget, $25. For $25, I don't think you can do better. I'm very impressed. Once again, I need to look at the lock hub, but it's okay. Blade is okay. It's comfortable enough in your hand. So this is a QSP Parrot. I'm really impressed with it. I'm probably going to do one more video, maybe a live cast on knives. I want to talk a little bit more about sharpening and a little bit about the high-end knives, the type of stuff that I normally carry. Like this guy. Don't get me wrong, none of the budget knives can hold a candle in terms of build quality, utility, and all that to a $250 knife, at least this one. But for the money, I'm going to go hunting in April and probably shove 3 of these in different portions of my pack and one in the pocket, and good to go. And if I lose one, I'm not going to cry, right? So, I am really impressed with what you can get for the money nowadays. 20 years ago, when I was really first time seriously getting into knives, when I got done with college, got a job, and I finally had a little money, I seriously got into knives. This stuff did not exist. It's really impressive what you can get now for $50. If you have questions, you know where to find me, darklordofoptics.com, or post a comment under this video, and I will be happy to try to address it the best I can. Thank you for watching.